welcome back to the Recovering Out Loud podcast. I'm your host, Charles Van Loucks, and today I'm going to continue the Ask an Addict segment that I've been doing, and I got some really good questions sent in, some that are a little bit more advanced, I'll say, and I'll just jump right into it. So, first question here. How do you deal with cravings and triggers? I think that's a really good question. And in particular, early on, I think that the cravings and the triggers can feel just engulfing. It can be really, really difficult. I'll start with cravings. So I think that cravings can be usually attached, I've noticed, at least for myself, to triggers, right? So something, triggers me, and then that kind of triggers a craving sort of thing. And I think for myself, it was very much about figuring out, what people, places, and things started to cause some of my triggers. And I even found some that I had kind of built up in my own mind to be more triggering than they ended up being. For example, like going back to the pool hole, right, where I used to do all my activities, right, back in the day. I think I had it built up in my mind where as soon as I walked in there, sitting right at the bar, it would be like the three people I did not want to see ever again in my life, right? Or something like that. And, my anxiety and my brain would just kind of take it from there and, kind of throw me for a loop. So the first thing that I'll say about, cravings and triggers is that it's, sometimes not as much as we think, right? And we don't necessarily have to give it so much power either, right? I think that, that comes with more time, more practice. I think, you know, adding in the proper tools and the right supports can be helpful too. Like, before I returned to that, pool hall, that potentially triggering place, right? And then the triggers would lead potentially to cravings, right? So the way that I dealt with that whole situation is I brought a support person with me, right? I, made sure that I had taken a couple steps previous in terms of, going to a pool hall with no bar. I was vocal with the support person I was bringing that, hey, I'm nervous I might run into so and so, or, I'm nervous that I might, feel anxious and want to, get a shot in a beer at the bar like I used to, and this and that, like being rigorously honest, right? Being transparent with our support people and how we're feeling and what it is that we're thinking, because I think the place that triggers and cravings can become, dangerous is when we don't say anything, right? We just keep it to ourselves. We suffer in silence, right? Just like that picture at the end of all my videos, right? The girl holding the umbrella and the rain, she's just getting rained on, right? But everything around her is fine. It's all about vocalizing that. It's all about knowing that, you're not alone and we can talk about these things together. But I'll say some specific tools that I find helpful. I like using it's called Insight Timer. It's a little like meditation app kind of thing, along with like TED Talks and stuff like that. But um, I like to take a little earbud and just put it in my ear. If I start to feel kind of weird, I'll just put an earbud in my ear, and I can do that in any situation, right? So if you're, stuck at work and you can't take a break, you can put an earbud in, right? And the point of it is to get that grounded feeling, right? It's to hear that positive, inspirational stuff through the meditation or the TED Talk or whatever that can help, distract us long enough for that feeling to pass. And I think that, that's where also reaching out to, supportive people can help, right? And you can do the same thing. I think that's why I like those tools so much, because you can do them anywhere, anytime. But you can just put an earbud in, right? So even if you're stuck at work and you're having terrible day and you're feeling triggered and you have cravings and all that, just put an earbud in and talk to somebody, because I've found over the years that just opening up and just saying the things that are on my mind at that time to another person, it helps to get them off of my mind and my chest, right? But it also gives them a little less power when I talk about them. And usually I end up getting some pretty good advice too that's helpful. Like, I've even heard it before, as soon as it comes out of my mouth, as soon as I hear the words, I'm like, oh yeah, that's fucking crazy. What am I doing? Like, don't do that. So it's helpful just to hear it out loud and hear another person's perspective on it as well, kind of thing. And I think also just something funny can help, right? Just, like there's a radio station, for example, that's all stand up comedy, right? Or, we can have that, using that earbud example, we can have an earbud in and listen to, like, what was it called? The prank call Jerky Boys. Yeah, I used to listen to that back in the day. The Jerky, listen to something funny in that moment, like whatever will help you kind of break uh, that moment down and make it a little easier. I would say things to avoid when you start to feel triggered or you start to feel like you're having cravings is, really try to not dive down that rabbit hole, right? Like, if you're feeling triggered, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling whatever, it's not going to help to dive down that rabbit hole and try and figure out exactly what happened. And oh my God, maybe it was the person who cut me off at the grocery store and did this thing. And it's not going to help, right? Like, even if we figure out exactly the point or cause of whatever we're feeling, it doesn't help us in that moment to know that. It doesn't bring us any peace, right? So I think utilizing those kinds of tools, a lot of people do like paint by number, just something where we're engaged, something where we're focused on another thing, like artistic kind of things can be helpful. Like, I mentioned paint by number, or I always enjoyed, taking pictures, right? So, if you have the ability to put some headphones in, listen to music, walk around, take some pictures, get into a different space, get outside, get into nature, call a friend, say, hey, man, I need to get out of here. I'm having a bad day. Let's go. If you have the ability, go hang out with a friend, right? I think the more that we can, get outside of ourselves during that time, the better. I think also, meetings can be particularly helpful as well. Like, if you're feeling triggered or you have some cravings or whatever it is, just, jump on a video meeting real quick. You can get on those pretty much any time nowadays, and just talk about it. Sometimes it's even simple enough just to sit back and listen, and to be specific, what I mean when I say listen is don't be distracted. Don't play a game on your phone. Don't text. Don't any of that. You look at the person when they're talking to you. They're expressing some real stuff, right? You feel what they're feeling, right? Get that empathy going. Put yourself in their shoes, right? Get outside your own head for a little bit, right? That can really help too. So I hope that helps on the topic of cravings and triggers. And if you have a follow-up question, send it in. I'll address all the ones that come up. Let's see. Next question here. How do you reverse bad habits? That's a good one. First thing I'll say is sometimes we have to force ourselves, right? They say it takes, 21 days, I think, something like that, to formulate a new habit, right? 21 days in a row of consistently doing that thing over and over, and then it becomes a habit. So I think, like, for example, smoking or vaping or something like that, right? There's actually a really cool, so I'm all about that peer model, right? And the Colorado Quit line has a peer model now. So it's really interesting when you call in there to try and quit, smoking or chewing or whatever you're doing. Now not only do they have, free patches, gum, lozenges, whatever, but they also have like an assigned coach for each person. And my experience with that coach was really positive because they helped me to identify like trigger areas where I wanted to smoke, right? And I noticed a big one for me was in the car. Like if I was stuck in traffic in the car, that's when I wanted to smoke. So then we built in a tool for there, right? So I started chewing gum instead. And I found that chewing gum was really helpful, At one point in time early on, I also utilized a vape with no nicotine in it. So it was a 0% nicotine juice. So I had the patch on all the time, right, with their step down process that they recommend. And then anytime I had the feeling to smoke, I would, use the 0% nicotine vape. And I found that to be helpful, and then I slowly started using the vape less and less, started chewing gum more. Some people use, what are they, like cinnamon toothpicks, something where you can taste that intense flavor, and, it's the hand to mouth thing as well and all that. Other people use like cinnamon sticks, like that you cook with, so I think there's a lot of tools there to help with those kind of bad habits. I guess the other thing that I'll say too about reversing bad habits is, for me, it was helpful to draw a line in the sand, and have a truly fresh start and genuinely see myself as a new person when I got into recovery. Because I was, you know, a lot of my old self it was a facade. It was out of survival. It was, it wasn't real. It wasn't who I really was. So being able to draw a line in the sand and prove to myself that I was that good person still and a new person today was really helpful. So for example, I would, write down some different wins that I had, right? So, if I did some, random act of kindness out in public, I'd write it down, almost like a gratitude journal kind of thing. I'd write those down, and then I would start to, stack those up and then prove to myself that I am a good person now, and I think that, drawing that line in the sand and proving to myself that I was a good person, it also allowed me forgiveness for myself. It allowed me to, improve that negative self talk, right? By using like positive affirmations. That's what I did on a bunch of sticky notes. I had, pretty much the entire like border of my mirror. I just had like a little space like this in the middle of my mirror, but the whole thing was just covered in positive affirmations. And, if you want to try the positive affirmation route, I think it's super helpful. And the important thing to remember there is that you want to use specific versions of, you know, negative self talk, right? So if it's, I'm not enough, right? If that's what your inner critic or your negative self talk tells you, right? Then your positive affirmation would be using that exact way of saying it, but just, I am enough, right? You just flip it, make it a positive one. So you don't have to go too in depth. You don't have to write a big long thing or anything like that, but just make the positive version of it. And then when you're, in the bathroom mirror, brushing your teeth or, doing whatever, you can just kind of look around and recite those to yourself, or say them out loud or, whatever you're comfortable doing. And I find that really helpful for sure. Because just the same way that, negative self talk, we start to believe it, you know, when we hear it long enough, when we're beating ourselves up like that long enough, we start to believe it, right? So it's kind of the same thing where, if we can say nice, good, positive things to ourselves enough times, right? Enough days in a row, like I mentioned, forming a habit, 21 days in a row. If we can start to do that consistently, we start to believe the positive ones too. And that's where it comes for me. um I think that the bad habits for myself some of them kind of stemmed from like self-destructive sort of stuff, you know, and when I was able to start to improve that negative self-talk, make it more positive, right, all that stuff, it started to help with that. It started to help with seeing myself as a different person, you know believing that I deserved good things and happiness and all that stuff. So um be kind to yourself. That's absolutely one of the cornerstones of my own recovery today. I got to give myself a break. you know I am a million times harder on myself than anyone else ever will be. And by the way, I used to speak to myself worse than anybody ever would, you know? And that's a big part to change for sure. So, I got to take care of myself better than I ever have before now, just like Mike Wagner talked about on our long term recovery episode of him obtaining 44 years. He said that he became worthy of taking really good care of himself. That's how he obtained, 44 years. So it's definitely not something to shrug off, or like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, or it is, it is. And, not pushing stuff down and minimizing and all that, you know, it's all connected. It's all connected, because if we believe something negative about ourselves, then we're going to continue some small self-destructive habit, right? So it's, depends on how we see ourselves, right? I mean, all that stuff is affected. So um I think it's important to keep in mind that, our best thinking got us to, a meeting, treatment, whatever it was for you, right? But then we have to be willing to listen, and try the advice of these people who are here to help, right? We have to do all those things. So it's important to be humble, be teachable, all that stuff, and try some new stuff, you know? Worst case scenario, that particular tool doesn't work for you. You've wasted a couple minutes, right? But there's still other tools. Something will work. Something will help for sure. So, let me go to the next question here. This person wants help with stress management. Yeah, stress management is a good one. I feel like for myself today, I manage stress with backup plans, right? Like if I'm worried about something happening or whatever, I will formulate a backup plan for myself, because then I've given myself some control in that situation where maybe I normally wouldn't have any control, right? But by planning for that particular scenario, I've kind of been able to take it off my own mind a little bit. I've been able to take away its power a little bit. So now, if that situation does come to fruition, I have a plan in place already. I don't even have to think about it. It's ready to go. So I think that's a good one for stress management. The other thing too is, I there's enough stuff in life that we absolutely have to take seriously, and it's really important, right? So try to reduce the rest. You know, like for example, I missed the bus and now I'm going to be a little late. I could take that one of two ways, right? I could either beat myself up about it and, oh, you're late for everything and blah, 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 right? And just make myself feel worse, which, by the way, doesn't make the new bus get there any quicker, right? So why even do it? It just hurts me. That's it. Or I can say, hey, you know what? I'm going to learn from this situation. I'm going to learn that my 15 minutes that I plan to get here is not enough. Even though it only takes 10 to walk here, I forgot my keys. I spilled coffee. The dog peed on my shoe. Like, what I mean, life, right? So, give yourself a little extra buffer. If you got to be there at noon, assume you have to be there at 12:45. Then you'll just be a little bit early. You can have a cup of coffee. You can sit and play on your phone. You can whatever. It's just a lot less stressful way to go about it. And I try to not take stuff too seriously when I can help it. So those kinds of things can be helpful as well. So not everything is the end of the world, right? I don't have to be that hard on myself. I don't have to, hold myself to this unobtainable goal of perfection. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So I think those are some good habits for, you know, stress management, and also just kind of giving yourself the ability to, have some balance, right? And like, for example, if you're planning your day, or your week or something, and you have, a certain number of things that you absolutely have to get done, right? And then you have maybe 6 things that you would like to get done, right? And then you have a few others that would be fun, but only if I have time, kind of thing. Why don't you take that 6 things that you would like to get done, reduce it to 5, and put one of those fun things in its place? That's a good way to manage your time and ultimately your stress by having a little bit of balance, right? Because at the end of the night, if you can look back over your day and see some kind of balance, you can see some kind of, oh man, I had some hard work to do. It was a long, stressful day, but oh, then I got to go see that movie. That movie was awesome. Having that kind of, balance, and just being able to see that in our day can be really helpful, because oftentimes people get kind of bogged down when it's just, you know, wake up, go to work, go to sleep, wake up, go to work, go to sleep, right? It's too much like that for a lot of people, and just switching little things up, starting small ways, like, instead of, instead of just rushing out the house with no breakfast and then being kind of hangry until lunch, why don't you just wake up like, 10 minutes earlier, right? Put some Eggos in the toaster, whatever. It's quick, you know. Have a little protein shake, whatever it is. Just kind of give yourself that little, extra leg up to have a good day, and have a little less stress, because at the end of the day, we're the only ones who can determine what kind of day we're going to have. Right now, that's not to say that stressful, frustrating things might not happen during your day, but we don't have to let them affect us like that. We can use other tools to release that, right? We can go work out if we're feeling frustrated, go hit a driving range, go blast some golf balls, get that frustration out in other ways. So I think it's, figuring out what those tools are that kind of fit you in your situation best, and, kind of developing that equation for yourself of, what's the most helpful for you in your recovery, and, what areas do you want to build up, what things do you want to reduce, all that stuff. Because it's all connected. At the end of the day, this is all connected. you know our mental health affects our cravings, and the way we see ourselves affect this and that, and our work and triggers, and everything is connected. So trying to view it as a whole life kind of approach can be helpful. So um let's see, next question here. How do you stay in gratitude? Yeah, that's a good one. It's hard. Honestly, it's hard, right? I think that sometimes, we can almost become like a little bit obsessive about things, and wanting things to work out perfectly, and getting frustrated if they don't, but I think just coming back to the gratitude list, and even diving a little deeper, and talking with people about your gratitude list can be helpful too, kind of involving others in that as well. Because then you can get outside feedback. And I think that that's a place a lot of people don't necessarily take gratitude, right? They always, like when someone's making a gratitude list, for example, they'll say, okay, I'm grateful I have food and a place to sleep and that I'm clean, right? But if they ask somebody else, they get somebody else's feedback, they'll say, "Oh my God, dude, if I were you, I'd be grateful to have a fun personality. You're a good looking person. You are compassionate. Be grateful for your beautiful kids, your wife, your whatever, your dogs, right? Like there's always so much more that sometimes we have a hard time seeing, and when we involve others, it can be eye opening, you know." And then you can do the same for them too. Like I've always thought it's kind of cool to have a road warrior buddy, for like going to meetings together, holding each other accountable, all that kind of stuff. And that can be a perfect person to do that with, or even your sponsor, your coach, whomever, But I think involving those outside point of views can be helpful with gratitude sometimes. And, if I'm having a particularly difficult day, like getting back to gratitude, um, I'll get into a meeting, right? Whether it's a video meeting in person, it doesn't necessarily matter. But just getting into, although I will say, actually, in person, I feel like is always better because you can connect with people better. You can go out and have coffee after and all that. But, regardless, for the sake of, getting back to gratitude, you could do either one. But sorry, tangent. um, let's see, gratitude. So if I'm having a particularly hard time getting back to gratitude or a rough day or whatever, I'll hop on a video meeting and I'll just listen. I don't necessarily need to share about the day that I'm having or what I'm feeling or thinking or whatever. I could just sit there and listen. Oftentimes, I find myself being able to get out of my own brain for a while and just feel for other people, you know, just feel for what they're going through, you know, remember what that early recovery struggle was truly like, and then usually I remember my problems really aren't that big of a deal, you know, and I think perspective can be really helpful with, getting back to gratitude and, just positivity in general, really. So yeah, try some of those. See if those help with gratitude, and if anyone else has any other tools or tips, tricks, whatever that they like for any of these things that we've talked about, leave them in a comment. I'm sure somebody else would love to read and hear some other suggestions too, because this is very much a communal kind of thing. We're all going through this life and recovery thing together and figuring out our own paths and all that. So just remember, like if you're sitting in a meeting and maybe you feel like you don't have much to offer in terms of wisdom or whatever, just say something, right? Somebody needs to hear whatever you're going to say for sure. No matter how, no matter how inspirational and perfect the share before you was, and oh my God, how am I going to follow that up and blah, blah, blah. Just talk, just be real, you know? And yeah. So, let's see. Last question here. What is the balance between isolation and risky social situations? Yeah, good question. Because you don't necessarily want to isolate. Now, by the way, I'm gonna add a little color there because some people would call self care like if you just need to rest and relax and hang out. Some people would call that isolation if you do it by yourself, but I disagree with that because for me, it's all about the, kind of goal of the action. Self care, relaxing, taking care of ourselves, all that, that has a very different goal than isolating. Isolating is, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to see anybody. I don't like people. I don't like myself. I don't want to be around them, blah, 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 blah. Right. So that's when, we need to get out of our own way and force ourselves, just like the 21-day habit thing, right? Sometimes we have to force ourselves to do something different, right? Because the reality is that, nothing about our situation or our life is going to change if nothing changes, you know? we have to take those steps. We have to push ourselves, right? Sometimes we have to force ourselves to do things that we know is good for us, right? Whether we're tired, whether we're whatever. But we can also utilize tools for that too, right? Virtual tools. We can do, reach out for somebody and have them come to our place, right? If we're really that tired, not really whatever, you know, that can be a good way to do it. But I would say with the risky situations also, that's very much, I don't know. I mean, I've heard people talk about that they, from time to time, will challenge their recovery, kind of see where they're at, right? And I suppose I understand that to a degree, but I don't see the benefit, you know? Like, I go to a house party where people are using and drinking and I stay clean. How is that a victory? Is that a situation I want to be in? Is that something I want to do consistently? No, not at all. That's the whole life I'm trying to get away from. So what's the point, right? So the risky situation stuff, I see 0 point to that. Now, I do see a point, however, to reconnecting with some old friends. Maybe they're in a better place now, maybe they're more supportive, maybe whatever, but we don't have to do it there, right? It doesn't have to be risky. We could go bowling, we could go, whatever, anything, coffee. It doesn't matter what we do. The point is the relationship, the friendship, the reconnecting. That's the point. That's what's important. So I would say kind of landing somewhere in the middle of all that, right? Trying to, if you're feeling a little more on the isolated side of that equation, I would say balance that by letting people in, you know, calling people, right? Letting people come over, doing stuff with them. And by the way, if you're feeling like you can't even pick up the phone, you can't even reach out for help, you can't open up, you can't say anything, if you're feeling like you're in that place, I want you to pause the end of this video. Okay, the second to last frame is that picture that I had made of the no more suffering in silence. Okay, I want you to screenshot that. And I want you to send that to somebody the next time you feel like that. Post it as your profile picture, send it in a message, do whatever you want with it, but have somebody be aware of what that means to you and why you're sending it, right? And then share that if you're feeling that way. Because the point of that is to say, hey, dude, I'm hurting. I need somebody, but I can't get vulnerable enough to pick up the phone and say, dude, I need help. Help me, right? But just sending a picture, boom, we can do that. It's no problem, you know? So just know that, there are tools, there are ways we can get through this together, and finding that balance between isolation and risky social stuff, it's there. Absolutely. So, just kind of challenge yourself in terms of like, what's the motivation behind the actions I'm going to take, right? Am I going to a house party in a self destructive way? Am I going there to, test myself? Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Right? We can question ourselves, right? We can ask ourselves those tough questions, right? I mean, I think that's where growth and change and lots of good things come from, you know? But, don't be afraid to pull people out of that world either. I mean, we escaped that world once before. Why would we go back to it? I have no idea. So I would say, try to see who are your real friends and, who's willing to, come along with you in terms of trying some new stuff, finding some new fun activity, doing something else, right? Because if they're a true friend, they should be willing to do other stuff with you, right? If they're just a using buddy or a drinking buddy or whatever, the only thing they give a shit about is using and drinking, right? They could care less if you're there, right? And they'll show that through their actions of, no, we're going to a party. I don't care how you feel. Sorry, right? And then that'll tell you, hey, maybe this isn't the best friend for me right now, but who knows? Later on, maybe they will be, but right now, especially in early recovery, we got to protect our recovery better than anyone else because we're the only ones who can, You know, we cannot let anybody else mess with our recovery ever. So, just remember, it's a privilege to be your friend. Okay. You don't need to people please. You don't need to have a bunch of people around you just to feel like, oh, I'm a good friend. I have a bunch of friends. No, fuck that. No. You want to have quality of friends, not quantity. So, I hope that this was an interesting episode for everybody. And if you'd like me to go over some of your questions on the next episode, uh, post them down below. Or if you feel more comfortable, you can email them to me. I'll have my email down in the description. And we'll see you on the flip later.